Welcome to everyone who is here today. Thank you so much for coming and being a part of this conversation, which for me is really the heart and soul of what I do. For those who don't know me, I'm Karin Gutman, and I'm the founder of Spirit of Story, which is devoted to mentoring, guiding people, and discovering and writing their personal stories. So, and a big warm welcome here to Lara Love Hardin. Thank you so very much for coming today. I'm very excited for our conversation, and I want to give people a little bit of background on you for anyone who doesn't know you. So, Lara Love Hardin is an author and she's a literary agent. She's the founder and president of True Literary. Her memoir, which is The Many Lives of Mama Love, is a 2024 Oprah Book Club pick and a New York Times bestseller. She has an MFA in creative writing, and apart from her own book, she is also a 5-time New York Times bestselling collaborative writer, including the #1 New York Times bestselling Designing Your Life and the 2018 Oprah Book Club pick The Sun Does Shine, which she co-authored with Anthony Ray Hinton about his 30 years as an innocent man on Alabama's death row. She is a fierce advocate for incarcerated women and is the co-founder of the Gemma Project, a gender-responsive organization serving incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women. So thank you, Lara, for making time for us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for so many people being here so early well, it's my early in the morning.
Right, exactly. You're right. Over here on the East Coast, it's 1 p.m. But yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for getting up early.
Yeah.
So before we dive in, I wanted to give our audience here maybe a thumbnail summary of your book, because I think that will just give some context for the conversation. If you don't mind, I'm going to just share a little summary. So the Many Lives of Mama Love is a story about a soccer mom who has been hiding a shady secret. She is funding her heroin addiction by stealing her neighbor's credit cards. She is convicted of 32 felonies, which lands her in jail for nearly a year, during which time she is separated from her 4 sons. But she quickly learns the rules and brings love and healing to her fellow inmates as she climbs the social ladder and acquires the nickname Mama Love, showing that jailhouse politics aren't all that different from the PTA meetings she used to attend. When she's released, she reinvents herself as a ghostwriter, now legally co-opting other people's identities and getting to meet Oprah, meditate with the Dalai Lama, and having dinner with Archbishop Desmond Tutu. The Many Lives of Mama Love is a journey from shame to redemption, despite a system that makes it almost impossible for us to move beyond the worst thing that we have done. So I'd like to really devote our conversation today to the radical power of personal narrative, that has the power not only to transform ourselves as the writers, but also those whom we share it with. And through our conversation, I really want to elevate the genre of memoir to the height and respect that it deserves. And I'd like to also just learn, you who have the skills and the expertise as a writer, how you've harnessed the genre for good, really. So I'm going to start with something that you said in an interview. You said that by writing your story, that you stopped the lineage of trauma in your family, and that by facing your past, you are leaving the greatest legacy and gift to your children by writing this book. What do you mean by that?
I was like, I said that? That's deep. No, I remember. I remember saying that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, it's like that's good.
I thought
You
so
know,
too. That's why I wrote it down.
I come from a long line of women who kept secrets. And I think historically, women have always sort of stayed silent for survival. Um, and I'm only saying all this because that is actually the theme of the novel I'm working on. It's about women and secrets, but it's fiction. So I think, finally, I learned very early on in my childhood to pretend and to be whoever I needed to be, to sort of assimilate or get invited to dinner to my friends' families, to my friends' houses with and sort of assimilate to their families, because my own home life wasn't that conducive to family dinners, put it that way. So, um, I think by finally just telling the truth, it's that simple. It's not no, it's no big, no more or less than just that. By telling the truth of my interior world, like I never knew my mom's interior world. I never knew what was going on with her. I only knew, through my perception of and my expectations of what she should be and shouldn't be. Um, so I think, by doing the hard work and sort of losing everything and rebuilding myself from the ground up at, in midlife, basically, I did, I hope, so far so good, put an end to that long legacy, especially in my family, of secret keeping and family dysfunction and so on and so on. So, I grew up in a family where nobody talked about anything. No one said, "How was your day?" No one, I certainly had zero language for emotions. Um, and so I think that's I certainly, all my boys have read my book, unfortunately. I mean, fortunately, but also it's a lot of graphic things that you probably never want to know about your mom in there.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that I've created this culture of radical honesty in my family, and that was a gift of going to jail. I could be nothing else but real there. There was no fronting, there was no pretending. I was the perfect soccer mom when my kids are visiting me on Mother's Day while I was incarcerated. Like all of that is out the window, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And so what's left when all of that is out the window is just to get really real. And one of the gifts and one of the reasons I say in the book that my experience actually made me a better mother. And trust me, I wish I wasn't someone who had to learn things the hard way, right? And I wish my learning the hard way there was not collateral damage, that my story doesn't become my children's sort of resilient story, if it could be another way, but I can't rewrite the past. Even in memoir, you can't rewrite the past.
Mhm.
Um, but I do think it made it so there was nothing through their like teenage years and college years, and even now as young adults. My youngest is in college, um, that they can't talk to me about.
Hmm.
There's no judge, and there's nothing post jail that their friends couldn't talk to me about. I have
Hmm.
4 boys, and all of their friends have grown up being able. I'm the adult they could talk to when things were going south, as they do when you're a teenager. So, that was one of the gifts and one of the ways I think that I certainly broke that legacy of silence and secrets in my family.
I really think that writing our stories, our personal stories, is one of the highest, if not the highest gift you can offer your children. Um, I don't know. I don't know if you read Mary Carr's Lit, but she writes an open letter to her son at the beginning of Lit, and at the last line or at the end, she says, "Maybe by telling you my story, you can better tell yours." And
Yeah.
that's what you've offered your boys too. They're going to be more successful humans in the world, being able to write their own story or have clarity on their own lives, right? Their
Yeah.
own. Um, so I mean, obviously you spent many years as a collaborative writer, ghostwriter, and I'm wondering, um, when you turn the tables on yourself, did the writing flow? I mean, writing's, I think, hard. To crack a story is hard no matter which way you do it. But maybe you feel differently. But I'm just wondering, did the writing flow more easily when you're writing other people's stories? Was it harder with your own?
There was one aspect. I mean, my book, I've written 14 books, only one is me. So the mystique of writing a book like thing is gone for me, like there's a very like practical way to tackle it. It's not like this
Mm,
big overwhelming thing. I have zero patience for spending more than 2 days max on any chapter. Like, if it's more than that, then I just don't know what I'm doing. That's how I kind of feel.
mm,
I don't really believe in writer's block. I believe it's lack of information or lack of, if it's a memoir, you haven't like held the mirror close enough.
mm,
But what was difficult after being so many people, and 12 of those 14 books, is it 14? Yeah, were men. The voice was a man. I was a man. I was Archbishop Desmond Tutu. I was Anthony Ray Hinton. I was John Gutman. I was a neurosurgeon. I was, and so I was an Israeli researcher. Like I was like all these different voices, and I found voice I'm good at, and that's sort of like a gift of childhood trauma. I'm really good at doing voice, at reading people and doing voice. Um, so I had some false starts with my own voice on the page,
mm,
right? Because I all of a sudden I was like, wait, who am
mm,
I?
mm,
Which of my many lives, like it was sort of this very meta crisis. And I wrote a few chapters, um, and I have about 6 chapters that didn't go in the book at all, right? And were kind of false starts. So I had only a few weeks of false starts, and
mm,
then I sort of stopped and I was like, okay, I'm if I'm going to do this book, I'm going to be really honest, and I'm going to be my messiest self. My goals were to be really honest, to make sure I was the only villain in my story. I wasn't blaming anything else for my questionable life choices, we can call them.
mm,
And just to give the truth, but I wanted to be honest. And when you can like razzle dazzle with letters, with those 26 letters, I could have faked honesty, right? I could have wrote an honest memoir that some people would get, and then other people would be like, she's hustling us a little bit. So in order
mm,
to actually do that, get to my voice and get really honest, which is my real voice, right? That I
mhm,
wanted this page. I had to go very far away, like across the world by myself, no children, no work, a very small window where anyone who knew me could contact me. I think it was like a 14 and a half hour. I went to Koh Samui, Thailand for 7 weeks, and I wrote the whole first draft there.
wow.
And just to dive in deep and be really honest. And there's things in the book that were not in my book proposal that my editor didn't know, my children didn't know, my agent didn't know. Um, and that I thought I would never tell anyone. And mostly I'm talking about like that time when I was out on bail, because that was nowhere in the book proposal.
Mhm, mhm,
So yeah, I think once I let go of thinking about how I wanted to come across to other people, then I could just be my full, somewhat messy self on the page.
mhm,
And then
mhm,
it was easy. Then it flowed. Then I could do a chapter a day. But
mhm,
I had a book proposal, because of nonfiction, unlike fiction, you write a book proposal, it sells, and you have a year to actually write the book. Fiction, that's why I'm here. Fiction, you got to write the whole book first, which is crazy to me. Um,
mhm, mhm.
but
So you did sell it on proposal.
yeah, sold it on proposal. And so I had a lot of the writing I did for the proposal. It was a very long proposal. It was probably 120 pages. So I
Mhm,
had a lot of I wasn't starting those 7 weeks with blank pages for every chapter. I had a lot of writing I could still use. And I had a full blueprint of what I was doing in each chapter,
mhm,
with
mhm.
room to like, okay, actually, I got to
Right.
tell this other story that I haven't told anyone, if I'm being really honest, kind of
Mm,
thing.
mhm, mhm. Wow, interesting. Um, so one of the things that you said, well, I don't know if it was in the book or in an interview that I read, or watched. You said that writing helped you make sense of the world, I, ever since you were young, and what I found really remarkable is that you stopped writing when you started using, and that you wrote that opiates made writing impossible. And then I just want to read just a quote from the book. You wrote, I know I can't have this. I think it's something that you wrote during your time in jail. You, you wrote, I know I can't have a life. I know I can't have a life and use drugs. I know I will have to find something other than drugs to fix whatever is broken in me, but I don't know how to do that. And then it seems like, sort of on the heels of that, you reawaken to your writing in jail. And it seems to be the very thing that that changes your trajectory. Is that accurate?
Yeah, for sure. When I got out of graduate school with my MFA, I had three boys right away. My oldest son was born 2 weeks for my MFA thesis, which was a book of short stories, and was due. And so I finished that up with him on my lap and a keyboard. Um, and then I stopped writing. And when I stopped writing and stopped making sense of the world, which I really did as a kid, I started reading really young, and that was kind of my escape from chaotic family. And then that is, everyone knows that's the gateway drug to writing. You're going to read a lot, you're going to start writing. And then college and graduate school, and then as a young mom, and I stopped. And it was then that, like, when things got tough and my marriage was falling apart, my husband was cheating on me, that I took, a prescribed pain pill for emotional pain, right? And that was really that was the beginning. And it was only when those opiates was gone for a bit, that the writing came back. And that's how I needed to make sense of the world again. And this time I was in jail and had lost everything, and was not even in, I was just a number. It was nothing else. And so that was a real gift, that a gift of having everything stripped away that I had, like, constructed to, this is my life, this is who I am, this is my role in the world, was gone. And so the writing came back, which is always there for me, and it saved me once again. And I learned to ghostwrite. I started ghostwriting in jail for the other women, and that was, and I had a gift with that. And really I felt, yeah, it was good to have that. It was good to have that again.
Mm-hmm. Would you be willing to read the excerpt that we talked about?
Yeah. Okay. So it's like, it's a little bit long, so I'm going to stop halfway, and everyone can, like, wave if you want me to keep going, or just look silently at the screen if you've had enough. Because sometimes when people read you, it's really boring, as anyone who's been to a bookstore event will tell you. So
well,
I'll try not to make it boring.
I mean,
So,
to me, this part is the reawakening to the writing, which is
yeah.
the sort of the whole point.
So I'm starting at, there's an actual library. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So Blaine Street is where I got moved to, for those of you who haven't read the book, halfway through my incarceration, which is more minimum security than the main jail. There's an actual library at Blaine Street, and I read every volume. My new favorite is the Book of Awakening by Mark Nepo. It's organized in daily dated essays, and I read it like a horoscope, looking for whatever wisdom I need to get through this particular day. It's uncannily accurate. One of the observations, sorry, I'm trying to find a way to read this and not look away. One of his observations resonates especially strongly with me. Pain pushes you until vision pulls you. After lights out, I lay in my bunk bed and try to trace my life back to the moment when I stopped letting a vision for my future pull me and started letting pain push. Because I did have a very clear vision at one point, and it didn't have anything to do with marriage or money or motherhood. From the time I first escaped into books, all I wanted was to be a writer. I was going to write novels that move people, that help them understand the world and themselves better. I wanted to make people feel, whether it was laughing or crying. And if the vision also had me rich and famous and fabulous, I was okay with that. Writing was always the only way for me to make sense of my childhood, my family, my fears, my emotions, my vast and confusing interior world. I was always a better version of me on the page. I was always at my most honest on the page. I could transcend every limitation I believed I had when I wrote. In high school, I may have lived in a small apartment while my friends had big lawns, but writing transcended class. Writing transcended loneliness. Writing transcended self-doubt and fear and heartbreak. I never needed a drink or a drug to write. When I took that first pill after Dylan was born, I stopped writing. I told myself it was having children and financial troubles and a difficult marriage that made writing impossible. I told myself there wasn't enough time in the day to write, but all the excuses were lies. Opiates made writing impossible. The drugs I took to avoid pain kept me from the one thing that helped me cope with pain. Writing was my survival strategy and a bridge to other people. It gave me a sense of self-worth. It gave me joy. But mostly it was how I let feelings flow through me. Once I stopped writing, every bit of pain stayed in my body where it settled and weighed me down so much that the only way I could move through life at all was to take a pill as needed for pain. Then 2, then 10, then 20, then 60. And every time I tried to stop, tried to choose a life without something to dull the pain, I couldn't stop for very long. I couldn't stop long enough to realize what I really needed. I needed the writing. Okay, keep going. Okay. I started writing again. I start writing again. I write stories on the computer and print them out because we aren't allowed to save documents. I write an essay about anger. There's a woman in Blaine with the last name Dahl who suffered horrible childhood abuse, and I write a story about the million ways to break a doll. I read the story to Tracy after relapse prevention class one night, and she sits in silence when I finish. Can you please read that to me again? She asks softly. I read her the story again, and then I read her my essay about anger. They're so great, she says. I'm blown away. Can I take them to make copies? Every day that I write, I feel vision pulling me. It's not a clear vision, but there's a tug. Writing not only passes the time, it makes me feel like I am me again, the old me, the real me, the me before the mess. Tracy brings back many copies of my anger essay, and it gets passed around Blaine Street. When Jacinda, a 30-year-old who looks like she's 12, comes to me and asks if I can write her letter to the court, asking if she could be moved from Blaine to a long-term residential treatment program, I'm not sure if I know enough to argue on her behalf for treatment. We sit on a bench in Blaine's backyard, and I ask her why she wants to go to an 18-month treatment program rather than just do her 6 months at Blaine. Because I don't want to come back here, she says. I don't want to go to treatment, but I need to go to treatment. Look, it's 18 months of structure and regular meals and therapy and support, but I'll be safe there. You feel me? Drawing on Eckhart Tolle's advice, I stay as present as I can while Jacinda speaks. She tells me about her ex who always finds her, and her mom who died 2 years ago, and her sister who's been raising Jacinda's son for so long that he thinks she's his mother. I have to put my own desperation to get out of jail aside. I would never trade 6 months for 18 months and really listen to Jacinda. I try to see the world through her eyes, understand her backstory. It's not pretty. One horrible foster home after another, running away from abuse, getting raped and kidnapped while high, getting locked up for the first time because she was crashing at a drug house that got raided. Okay, I say, after she's shared her stories for over an hour. I'll write your letter. What do you want? Asked Jacinda. I always forget about the quid pro quo of jail friendship. I'm trying to cut my carbs, so I'm done trading things for bear claws. I fall silent as I ponder what else I could possibly want in this place. I'll make your bed every morning, she says. Please? I suck at making my bed. I can never get the corners as smooth and tight as the guards demand. I nod and smile in agreement. And, she adds, if I get released because of your letter, I'll make sure someone else makes your bed until you get out. It's a great incentive, but when I sit down to write the letter to the judge, I'm not thinking about my messy bed. I'm imagining that I am Jacinda and all she's been through. I'm thinking about how many times I've been in and out of jail and how badly I want the structure of the residential program. I write a long letter imploring the judge to send me to treatment to give me a fighting chance to never come back to jail. As Jacinda, I end the letter with this. I never had anyone care enough about me to tell me when to go to bed, to make sure I was eating healthy, to ask me how my day was. I want to follow the rules. In Santa Cruz Residential, they may not be my family, but it will still be the closest thing I've ever had to a real home. Please let me go home. It's all I've ever wanted. Jacinda and I mail the letter, and for the next 2 weeks, she makes my bed every morning before inspection. When the classification officer comes over from the main jail and asks for Jacinda, I go down to the lobby with her. He seems rushed and gives me a slightly annoyed look as I listen in on their conversation. He hands Jacinda a stack of paperwork. You get transferred tomorrow to treatment, he says. Pack it up tonight. They're coming for you at 6 a.m. Jacinda bursts into tears. Okay, then, he says, and walks away quickly. Jacinda and I look at each other stunned. She throws her arms around me. I'm so happy for you, I say. You deserve this. You deserve a real chance. Thank you, she says. I don't know how you did it, but what you wrote, it was just everything I've ever felt and didn't know how to say. I hug her back tightly. There's a feeling I don't recognize that immediately overwhelms me, and my eyes well up. I'm so happy for Jacinda, but it's something else. I'm proud of myself. And for the first time in a very long time, I feel good.
Hmm. Thank you so much. I love that. Um, so yeah, I just read this. I'm so glad you read the whole thing. You write to make people feel. I'm feeling the tears. Gorgeous. Yes, you're here.
And oh, someone asked if I changed the names. I've changed all the names of the women in jail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. The only
Um,
people in my book who didn't want my children didn't want their names changed. And my ex-husband surprisingly did not want their name changed.
amazing.
Yeah.
Both ex-husbands?
Yeah. The first one, Brian said, any attention is good intention. That just gives you a clue. And then DJ said, well, what if I write a book someday? Yeah, use my name. And I was like, okay.
Uh-huh. That's funny. Um, so I do you have like an answer to why writing is transformative? Because we tell stories to each other day in and day out, like you can share your story verbally to a friend or, you know, uh, your son or anyone. So do you know what the difference is when you actually write it down and have to put
Yeah.
words to it on paper?
I mean, I think it depends what kind of writing, you know. I've certainly written a lot of things that are not transformative in any way. But I do think memoir specifically, there's something I think when you put it in writing, for me anyway, and I think, as an agent who represents a lot of memoir writers, it really is this way to integrate your story. It really like I can't, your rear view, like in the rear view mirror, I can see all the patterns and the threads and how this led to this. In the time, you're just, you're hanging on for dear life, right?
Mhm.
So there's something, I think that's just really right about being able to see those patterns and threads and sort of make that meaning out of all of the messiness and the things. And, memoir writing, like, as it isn't like all the facts and all the data. It's specific scenes that are like serving the overall like bigger themes and threads. So that's, unlike let's, autobiography is one thing, you have to be like very old and famous to get away with an autobiography. And
Mhm.
it's very like, I was born in 1967 and then I did, and it's super boring. Memoirs more visual. And then the other thing, just in general about memoir that I love is there's no other medium in the world. I'm going to argue. I don't know if this is true. It's a little hyperbole, but I think this is true. I believe
Go
this is
for
true.
it. Mhm.
There's no other medium, not film, not anything where you're in such close consciousness to another person. There's no other way to hack empathy
Mm.
because, and I specifically did my book
Hmm.
first person present tense. Like I designed my book in the writing of it. So because I have two categories of books you can put down and books you can't. And I really wanted to do that first one. Right. And so first person present tense, while it can be very exhausting for a reader if you don't do it right, and frantic, like there's no urgency. Like basically if you're reading my book, then if Wendy's reading my book, she's making every bad decision with me. She's
Mm-hmm.
close in my head, first person present tense,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that hacks empathy because you are me making choices,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? When
I
I
love
read,
that. I love that term, hacks empathy. I've never heard that
yeah,
since.
it really, like there's nothing else that hacks empathy. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
have all these things like, oh yeah, try to see the world, walk in other people's shoes, but like read a first person memoir. You are that person. You are
Mm-hmm.
that immigrant. You are that trauma survivor. You are that um, innocent black man on death row for 30 years. I'm thinking of Anthony Ray. Like you are that person and you are changed.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a dangerous medium. I love it.
Mm-hmm. I love
Right? Sneaky. It's a sneaky medium.
so
You're not preaching at people to change their mind. You're just making, I'm not going to preach at you and tell you should care about incarcerated women, but if you're me, you might end up caring at the end of it, whether you wanted to or not.
100%. You humanize them. I care about those women, and even like in just small scenes and brief ways, even in you're able to bring their whole story to life in just a couple sentences. It's sort of amazing. And that's one of my questions for you. Like, what do you know what you do? Because I feel like you do teach others to do what you do. And I'm just wondering, because you are able to get to kind of the raw emotional core in a way that translates so viscerally and that makes you care. And I'm wondering if there's anything that you can relay without, I guess, telling us the secret sauce. Maybe I want to know the
No, I
secret
mean, I'd
sauce.
love
Like,
to
what
tell
is
the
it?
secret. I'd love to tell the secret sauce, and I actually have to like figure it out, not intuitively, but in paper. I have like this summer I'm teaching writing for the first time in a really long time.
Where?
I'm teaching at Omega Institute, a retreat, the art and business of nonfiction writing.
Amazing.
And then for Story Summit in Santa Cruz, so back in my hometown for a week at the Chaminade, which is all women's writing retreat with a bunch of teachers, amazing authors teaching.
So you had to break it down.
Yeah, so I do think, yeah, so and that's on my to-do list. I do think, I mean, I used to teach creative writing, so fiction I've taught a lot, but I do think it's like how I kind of coach my authors who are doing memoirs, especially, and especially like because a memoir's got it, a memoir is going to be super boring if it doesn't have anything dramatic in it, and so you have to kind of walk this fine line. And most people are mining their trauma for gold, right? To share a memoir, and if they're doing for like to find the most specific, original you story, but make it as universal as possible. That's the trick, right? So and I'm really the thing I'm most proud of, I think, with my book is that like the middle class book club moms across the country can see themselves in it. And I'm going back a third time to the largest women's prison in the country at Chowchilla, and the women in prison can see themselves in it. And so I think like I'm very proud of that. I don't, I'm not quite sure how I did that. And I didn't even know that I wanted to do that, but I'm glad I did it. But I think, especially when you're writing about big things, big emotions, big feelings, big drama, like just my coach is always, you find the littlest, tiniest detail to show that big thing, the
Mm.
smallest thing, right? Because because I have like, I have authors who will write, give me like their sample chapter for the proposal, and it'll be like, my stomach was roiling with distress and did it, to show their emotion, or I was so full of anxiety. And I was like, no, how about you just describe your jaw clenching, the littlest, tiniest thing,
Mm.
but I'm also a minimalist writer by nature. Like I have no patience for a lot of description. Like, no offense to Where the Crawdad Sings, but I was like skipping pages. I was like, I know what a marsh looks like. Get me to what the people are doing and why,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm minimalist. My son Ty is like a gorgeous writer, and he's a maximalist. He's the exact opposite writer. Like his sentences will go on forever, and he's so in love with language, and he's a linguistics
Mm-hmm.
major in linguistics. He speaks 5 languages, and his sentences are beautiful, and I admire that. It's just not me. So
Mm-hmm.
by nature, I'm a like, I'm the queen of like the 1 word paragraph or the 4 word sentence. The Designing Your Life book you mentioned, that was a #1 New York Times bestseller. The first sentence of that #1 New York Times bestseller that I wrote was, Ellen liked rocks. It's very like
Mm.
Bob Book grade, kindergarten level thing. So I just like to make things as simple as possible.
You do, and but at the same time, you do. I feel like when you give us access to your inner world or what you're thinking, you do um like that feels free. Like you really go into it. Like it's
Yeah.
not a 4 word sentence. Like
Yeah.
you tell us what you're wishing for, what you're worried about, or and you really spend time sinking
Yeah.
into that as well. So it's like I feel like it's a maybe a
Yeah.
combination.
Yeah, I think it's a combination, and it is you have to kind of roller coaster readers too, writing it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it can't be all like drama, drama, cry, cry, cry. It has to be cry, laugh, long sentence, short sentence.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
really love like the rhythm of language. Like I know how it's supposed to sound in my head when I write. Like I can hear it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not poetry, but it has the rhythm of that in my head anyway, and then my way of knowing if I did that is just to read it out loud. If I read out loud, I was like, oh, that is not anywhere close to poetry. Then that's when I edit it up.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't have that rhythm.
Someone asked about your humor, if that's something that you're conscious of. And it sounds like from what you just said, it's like you're aware that you've got to kind of maybe give some relief here and there with some humor as you're writing, or is that you do a pass later, like a humor
No,
pass?
I
Because
don't.
there's so much humor in there.
Yeah, I don't do a humor pass later. I really hate editing after the fact. I kind of edit as I go.
Hmm.
Um, I don't do a humor pass. And actually, my editor at Simon Schuster cut out some of what I thought were my most hilarious jokes. He's like, no. So I think humor is how I am in the real world.
Mm.
I think I'm hilarious. My children do not. They think I'm cringy, but I think I'm hilarious. But I did, I do improv. I've done improv for 7 years, which I talk about in the book. So I found my like community of weird friends and grown-up theater kids and slightly misfit creatives that embraced me and welcomed me and didn't care about my past. But so I did that. I've tried stand up. I just like humor is how I make sense of the world too. I mean, and it's fun is like fun and play, which I didn't have for a really long time, or like really a high value both in work and life for me. So certainly in writing. I mean, I do love to make people cry, I won't lie. And I also love to make people laugh equally. So I just sort of try to get both those needs met, whether I'm in writing.
Hmm. And what about the ever elusive structure, which you seem to have a real knack for, like with your own book and with the ones that you ghostwrite? Like, how do you approach like finding the shape or the way to tell a story? Because, or how to even frame your own story? Because what I noticed is that like we didn't really go back into your childhood. Like we didn't do big flashbacks back there, and you didn't really go into your crimes, actually. I mean, obviously, you kick off the story with sort of the last straw, but
Mm.
I mean, I felt like those were big choices. And I was wondering how you knew how to tell it.
Yeah, obviously I did a lot of that structural work in the proposal, sort of like, and it's all, there's no right or wrong. It's just like, what do you gain or what do you lose in doing that? Right. So originally when I started, I was like, oh, I started the book at 12 years old. Right. Like originally, I have all these chapters that I wrote starting at 12. And the
Hmm.
first line, I just saw those chapters recently. And I was actually thinking of putting them on my Substack because they're kind of hilarious. But the
It
first
would be
line of my
interesting to
book,
read them.
yeah, the first line of my book originally was, I was the last person to know I had big breasts. Like it was funny, I thought, right? Like it was started at 12 and kind of went in my childhood. And then I was like, no, no. And then, there's this thing where you start in the action, right? Like the reality is most people like this Zoom crowd excluded because we are a curated group, right? But most people in the world don't read, right? And when they do read, they read fiction. And so most people they don't read nonfiction. And when they do read nonfiction, they don't read memoir, or maybe they do, but if they read memoir, it's celebrity memoir. So there's all these obstacles and barriers that you have to work against to get people in your book, right? In your story. If if the goal is impact, if the goal is like sort of whatever the goals are, right? Like that isn't just like to tell your story for your children or something, but if the goal is
Hmm.
to really have like a trade book out in the world that resonates like an educated or a wild, right? Like those are always the standards. Um, you kind of got to start in the action. You got to keep people hooked in. So I originally was always going to start at my arrest, right? Because that's right in the action. And then I thought maybe I'll go back, but then I made the choice for first person present tense, and that I told some backstory, but that
Yeah.
limits you a little bit. And, I told my whole childhood in like a few paragraphs on
Hmm.
purpose. And really, one of the reasons was I wanted to make sure that it didn't seem like I was blaming that because plenty of people have difficult or traumatic childhoods and they don't steal from their friends and neighbors, they don't go to jail, and they don't become addicts. And so there's this wanting that people have to know the formula if this plus this is going to equal addiction, right? And so I didn't want to give that formula because it is so varied and different, right? um just like I didn't really clearly, and I got some really mean DMs lately, like first ones in a year and a half, that I didn't like uh give a very clear path to recovery for people because it looks different and everybody's different. Um
Hmm.
so I chose to start at the time of my arrest. That was the first chapter in the proposal in the first draft. It was 2 days, 3 days maybe before the book was going into production, which means first draft done. It was a Wednesday. I remember this. And on Friday it was going in production. And it was gonna go, that's when it goes into copy editing. It's like the whole second year of the process from the time you sell it, right? copy editing, page proofs, publicity and marketing launch. And my editor at Simon Schuster, Eamon Dolan, who I love now, but at the time I did not. I always loved him, but he drove me crazy a little bit because he said, we need another chapter. We need a chapter of you committing your crimes.
Mm.
And so chapter 2 in the hotel was never anywhere. And I had to really look at my so-called honesty that I was so sure of, because I really didn't want to, I didn't want people to see me at my worst. I was still so like, oh, I could talk about shame and all these things, but like you actually see me committing crimes at this sort of dark time. And so he's like, is there a scene you can do? And I tried to find him. I was like, look, I can't go back in time. It's first person present tense. And I was like, actually, I can start the day before the book starts, because I knew exactly the scene to do. It was just like the low of the low. And so that whole staycation chapter wasn't in there until the
Wow.
very
That's, I
last
feel
second.
like
I wrote
it's
it
so
on a
important.
Wednesday afternoon, and Friday it went into production.
Wow, that's amazing.
That time he had edited me so much, I knew my own writing quirks, which I didn't know I had until he said, you know what, you write, I wonder, like a lot. And I was like, no, I don't. And then I searched it in the Word doc, and it was like, I've said I wonder 63 times. And I realized this was in the editing process. I was like, oh, that's me not really wanting to commit to what I'm saying or thinking, right? I'm just kind of throwing something out there to see how it lands. I wonder if, not really like, it's like me saying, I wonder if we should get married, Karin. Like, I'm not really saying I want to get married. I'm just like throwing it out there to see. And I was doing that throughout the book. And so I had to go back to every single one and take it out and like rewrite what I was actually trying to say in that scene. So he's a very good editor. But yeah, but I knew all my quirks, and I knew all his what he would sort of blast me for. And so that made it really easy to quickly write it in an afternoon. And it, like and people really loved that chapter. So he was absolutely 100% right. And my instincts were 100% wrong. And I can be delusionally sure of my instincts, but I also realized that was me just not wanting to look so bad.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, if you were writing someone else's stories, it probably wouldn't have been like such a block, right?
Yeah.
Like you probably would have seen that a lot earlier. Actually, I'm surprised that they didn't. I just feel like that's a critical piece to see you kind of like in that part of your life. So it's so interesting that it happened right before it went to print. So here's a question for just like all the people out there that sort of in theory want to own their stories. Like they like the concept, the intellectual concept of that, but in reality, like it's daunting, it's like, all for all the reasons, the judgment, the backlash, hurting other people, and shame, whatever the reasons are. So what do you have any, because one of the things I really loved about the book is that you really didn't shy away from even how you write about other people. You didn't dodge things. I felt like you really did. My experience is like face things and people and write about them and how you perceive them or how they were, and not always great lights. So anyway, I'm asking a couple questions here because I want to know what you think about writing about other people and how you approach that, but also just in the larger sense of what would you say to people who really do want to go there but are just afraid of really owning it?
So there's let me talk about the first one and then remind me of the second one, because I'm sure I'll forget.
Okay.
In my 50s. Okay. So I'll
make a note.
Yeah, thank you. What was the first
do you want me to repeat? Sorry. I threw two at you at one time. Okay, so let's start with like, how do people get over the hump of like they want to own their stories, but there's a fear, or it's like, do I really have to sort of go there?
So you can own your story. Obviously your story, like we're all the center of the world. Like each one of us is the center of the Zoom. Everyone else is just the little boxes around us, right? And that's true for each one of us. And so, your job in memoir is to tell the truth, right? Your contract says tell the truth. The legal review is going to say tell the truth, and that means if someone has passed away, you don't have to change anything. if, I changed the names of people to protect them or on legal advice from the Simon Schuster attorney. Um, and you can't change it and rhyme them. I changed it the last minute. So sometimes the women in jail, like I know their real names, but sometimes someone will be like, oh, Jacinda. And I'm like, wait, which one is, I don't know who I kind of forget at the last minute. Um, so there's that. But I think the point is not to, like, there's no way I was trying to get back at anyone in my book. So I think part of it is like, what is your intention in doing a memoir at all, right? Like the intention for it is everything. If it's to be rich and famous, it's not going to happen. No one gets rich and famous from writing books in general. Very few people. If it's to, yeah, so it just depends like what your goal is. I think that, and then when it comes to the fear of that, the question is really, what are you afraid of? I was afraid. And look, I'd done all this work and I had all this honesty, and the book, sold really well at auction. Like it's like all great. It was all set to go off. And 3 weeks before it was publishing, I had this like, oh my gosh, what have I done? I felt so sick. Like, that feeling like you eat too much cotton candy and you share too much information, like all combined in one, where I was like, oh no, what have I done? This is a nightmare. I can't reel this back. And it was just being really, really afraid. And what I was afraid of is that people would know the real me. They would see all that messiness, they would see all that truth, and they would run screaming the other way from me. It wasn't even so much like judgment, because I dealt with that and kind of like where I was like, it's really none of my business. I'm pretty good. I mean, we all want people to like us, but I'm way better at not caring, right? Um, but it was that thing like, this is gonna leave me, I don't know why I didn't have a language for it, but it was just like, this is gonna leave me alone and judged and scared and unsafe is really what it came down to. And I found the opposite happens when you really tell the truth, even if the truth is ugly and messy and you're your worst self, is that people run towards you because they feel safe to share their truth. And that's the gift. That is one of the big gifts of memoir. Not only is it like a guidebook for someone like, with Anthony Ray Hitton's book, 30 Years as an Innocent Man in Death Row, I can't compare with that. I was guilty and it was a year, like, so sometimes when I'm in a, the not the most gracious mood, or I'm like complaining, like, oh, I have to mop the floor. I'm like, oh, at least I get to mop my own floor. Oh, at least like, like he really taught, he really is a great spiritual teacher. He taught me about gratitude and forgiveness and not holding on to any bitterness or anything or grudges. Um, I think, I think that's the gift of memoir, is just like, I have so many DMs of everyone telling me their secrets now because they feel safe to do it,
Mm.
and so, and to some people I'm like inspiring, and other people I'm like a cautionary tale, like, look what happened to her, look what she did, and I'm okay with both things can be true, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So did that answer your question?
mm-hmm. Yeah. And then what about the piece of the people closest to you, like writing about your
Yeah,
sons, or writing about your ex-husband, and
yeah,
or and the not the best light,
yeah,
how do you navigate that? Because you could have dodged that.
yeah. I mean, I try to just give the truth of it and give my internal experience of that truth. Rather, like, I never say so and so is an asshole, or sorry, excuse my language if that's wrong. I don't say, like, I don't really do that. I just give the truth, and then readers kind of make, I have people like, oh my God, I was so mad at you. And I'm like, yeah, same. And they're like, I was so mad at your ex-husband. And yeah, same, whatever it is. Um, the only people that I would have changed anything for, and again, it's just my truth. Like, everybody can write their own book, the same story, the same time frame, and it would be very different. That's what I mean when we're all the center of our world. Um, and no one has ever complained that what I wrote wasn't true. They might have liked how that truth portrayed them, but no one has said to me, uh, even Darcy, that what I wrote was not true, right? Um, so the only people I would have changed anything for were my boys, and I let all of them read it as it was going into production. Also, even Caden, and that was really hard, and it was like the scariest. And I
Were
gave them
there
the option to have their names changed, which none of them wanted to, and they said it just made them feel closer to me. My oldest son said that, and Caden read it as an 18-year-old boy, and he was like, yeah,
Wow.
there were some boring parts. And I was like, what? And he's like, the parts I wasn't in, and then he found a typo and wanted me to pay for him. Like, it was really like a non-issue,
That's
you know?
amazing.
Yeah, they really liked it. And I think they're really proud, and they're friends. Cody and Dylan just got married this past year in April and August. And, Cody's wife, I did a bonus chapter in the paperback, which goes through Cody's wedding, when every cast of character in this book is in the same place, like post Oprah. So that is like something in fiction you can make up. That's why I love nonfiction. Like, if
Mhm.
it were a novel and I was like, oh, I'm gonna like conveniently get every single person in the same
Right,
room,
right, right. You think
like, you
it's like,
wouldn't
yeah,
believe it. That
right.
welcome to the wedding, neighbors are there, Darcy's there, all my in-laws, all my ex-husbands,
Oh
like the
my
whole
gosh, that'd be so fun to
thing.
read. That's not in my version.
Yeah. Well, if you have the audio, for anyone who has the audiobook or the ebook, if you delete it and re-download it, it'll be in your version. But
Okay.
otherwise, it's just in the paperback that came out. Just
Hmm.
the bonus chapter.
So, do you use like note cards or outlines, or where do you start with a plot? Do you start with the emotional journey of the character? Like, what's your
So,
process? Can you share anything?
yeah, I mean, I wish I could say I use fancy software, but I use Word. And I do, what I do is I do a list, like a rapid fire list at the beginning, even before proposal. Again, I'm doing proposal first, so then I have a blueprint, which is an outline, but that both says what's in here and what more is going to be in here. Um, but I do, I write it out in scenes. I just list scenes with like a one sentence bullet, like uh, out on bail, first night in jail, suicide. Like, I just list it like
Mm,
that. I just brainstorm without thinking. And
mhm,
like pivotal, because people are always like, how did you remember that? I was like, you remember your pivotal scenes, and you only want to put your pivotal scenes in the
mm,
book. And I
mhm,
also know, so before even those scenes, I kind of know the themes and the themes I want in my memoir. So every scene, is it adding to that or showing the opposite? Yes or
mhm,
no? You know what I mean? So, like, there's a way. So it's not like, oh, I have to give you all this detail because this actually happened. No, I don't. You don't need to
mhm,
read all that. You don't need to
mhm,
know what happened between year 3 and 4.
mhm,
If it's just like every day I went,
mhm,
building my life. Like, so, and if you look, like, there's actually not that many scenes in jail, right? And I told the things that move the story along, move the themes along.
mhm,
And there's a lot I left out, like,
mhm,
I probably left out more of the reasons why for a good 12 years I had nightmares every week about having to go back to jail. Like, I don't recommend it for anyone. It was good for me, but it's not recommended, and so, but I do it in scenes, and I did this for Anthony Ray Hinton, like, because we have 30 years on death row, all of that time in a like 5x7 cell where every day is the same. Like, how do you make that a page turner? And part of that, we're just doing those scenes and being able to jump time and not have it be a big, huge gap.
mhm,
So
mhm,
that's really, I think, the secret. If you think of it about it in these scenes, and just bold them rather
mhm,
than facts or chronology. And
mhm,
then, I will beautiful mind things, which is, those scenes are on sticky notes, and I put a big white paper on the board, and I'm kind of moving stuff around and getting chapter titles. And for me, I am absolutely enamored with first lines, last lines in every chapter.
mhm,
Titles, like, if I had my dream job, I would just be in a tower giving down titles and like first lines and last lines.
mhm.
Like, that would be my dream job.
That's such
Um,
a specific skill.
it's really, really fun. And like all my authors, I do, because you need that boom ending to a chapter to get
Yes.
people to turn the page.
Yes.
That's what you're designing against, right? Like, that you have to fight against the world that doesn't read. If you're writing books, right? Like, you have to, like, and it's a big world out there, and that's just more like the business. There's a business to it and design to it that's apart from like writing and style and voice and all of that. There's just
Yeah. And I mean, that might just be a great way to sort of wrap up our conversation, is just touching on, you as, a literary agent who is selling, who's buying work and or representing work and selling work. What I mean, I guess I'm just curious what your take is on the publishing industry these days. And, particularly I just love that your thing is memoir, and that's as they
Yeah.
say, like a tough sell. Like I'm so, yeah. I mean, how
Yeah.
do you turn that on its head, like from your point of view?
Yeah. I mean, it really is a tough sell. Like,
Okay. All right.
and I did really well in it because for a while I didn't realize how tough a sell it was. Like I just was ignoring that. It's gotten harder. I mean, I do big idea. I do my agency right now is just nonfiction. So I am doing like business books and big idea
Mm-hmm.
books, self-help. I love business books and self-help books too, and big idea books. Memoir's hard, and it's hard because in publishing is the same as it's always been. And I'm going to say nobody knows anything. Like all those fancy editors, they don't know. And so what they have to go on is the past, right, to predict the future,
Mm-hmm. Same
right?
for
So
television and films, like same
yeah,
thing.
and so where that gets frustrating as an agent, like I have a couple authors lately that I've signed who had previous books where I wasn't their agent, and their books didn't do too well. And so then I have to fight against that past track for totally different topic book, different market, different audience, different time, to get them to see a vision for the future. And that's really frustrating to me. And when
Mm.
people pass in my author's books, my go-to is like I will get my revenge on the New York Times bestseller list because I get really mad when we're kind of stuck in this fear-based like past like so here's what I think. One, great writing will always rise. Educated, great writing. She didn't have a platform. She hadn't done a book before. She wasn't famous. Things like that. Well, great writing will always rise. So like your best chance if you're like doing is just take classes like yours, writing workshop, like become a really great writer. Be willing to like kill your writing, kill all of the facts. If you're writing memoir, right? Kill all of those facts that don't serve. Kill pages and pages of truth if you need to, right? And really think in scenes and those themes. And I think it has to be, like objectively, if as an agent, if I were looking at my own story, it's just really weird. Like who goes from identity thief to ghostwriter to like working with these crazy people? It was like an objectively crazy story that I hadn't read before. I would like
Mm-hmm.
take it that way. So that is the other
Mm.
thing to look at. So um
Like what makes it pop, do you mean? Like what makes
but
it
yeah,
sort
and
of
what makes it
unusual?
different? What
Yeah.
makes it? I mean, I know it's your story and it's personal, it's great, but not everyone's story can be a book or should be a book or could be like, or can be a traditionally published book, I guess. So those are just the real things. And then the audience matters because the number one reason this sort of go-to language that editors use when they pass on a book submission is I don't know how to break this out in a big way. And what that means is you don't have an audience, you don't have a platform, and I don't know how I'm going to get the world to care in the million books that come out every year. So your job is and the job of your agent too, is to convince them otherwise. But like as much as you can start, whatever your themes and ideas are, like, and if you hate social media, you're going to have to get over it. Like I had pictures of my dog before, right? And now, so, I write in the bonus chapter, I said, someone I had like 300 followers and then I had like 30,000 or something. And I was like, someone sent me laundry soap, so I think that makes me an influencer, which is just like a joke. And Caden says it makes you cringe, and I was like, yes, it does. But that world, the world of book talk and bookstagram is really powerful for that word of mouth. Like my book wouldn't have done so well if it hadn't gotten book of the month club, which I didn't even know was a thing. I thought that was something my mom did. I didn't know it's still a thing. Even as an agent, I didn't know.
Mm.
And normally it's only fiction there. So a lot of the bookstagram world picked my book in book of the month and didn't know it was nonfiction.
Oh,
Like the amount
wow.
of people who are like, it was only when I got to the end that I realized this was a true story. So
But it says a memoir of
I
lying,
know,
stealing.
but yours again, people are
Uh-huh.
peopling. People are
Uh-huh.
peopling hard out there. So part of it was that it kind of like it was a little Trojan horse into the fiction world. So it got that attention. So
Hmm.
now like I'm fighting for all my authors, like to their publicity marketing teams, like get them in book of the month club, get it, because they don't do a lot of nonfiction. So it helps, it gets that attention. So yeah,
Hmm.
I don't know, but nobody knows anything. Agents don't know, editors don't know. No one knows better than you. Honestly, it's all so subjective and everyone's guessing.
And
And
you're going to stay on this side of things? Like do you enjoy being on the agent side versus like creating your own publishing house?
um yeah, I mean, I've threatened to publish things myself and start my own company if people don't buy a certain book that I'm selling because I just again I get mad. I get mad at the
I can
publishing
hear that.
Yeah, but and I like to fight for my authors. Like I don't take on that many projects, but when I do for a reason and I really care about them. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm pretty full up running an agency. I just hired another agent who is at WME for 10 years, and we just did a press release, Elizabeth Wachtel, so that kind of doubles my bandwidth at True Literary. And because we don't just like sell a book, like we develop it, we help revise it. We work on it, a proposal sometimes for a year
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
years before we
Mm-hmm.
sell it. So it's a lot of work and investment of time and energy. So it has to be something I really believe in and someone I want to be in a relationship with for years. So
Mm-hmm. And
um yeah.
someone was asking when you're going to reopen your submission.
I don't know. I think pretty soon. We're kind of get clearing the decks right now. So I think pretty soon, but I'll announce it on my Instagram and our website. We're
Mm.
having team meetings about it as we kind of clear the backlog. Obviously, the I was all ready to get going a year ago at this time, and then this is when the Oprah thing happened, which kind of threw me off schedule again. So I
Mm-hmm.
had to clear a
Oh,
lot of my
Oprah.
authors. Yeah, no, Oprah.
Jeez.
She's a lot.
Yeah,
No, it's amazing, amazing, amazing thing to happen 6 months post publication because it normally happens at publication now. So, yeah, it was a huge gift in spotlight. And I'm about to go in a few weeks back to Chowchilla book, to do book club again, which I'm really, which they wouldn't have allowed the hardback in there, and Simon Schuster wouldn't have donated 800 copies into the prison or gifted if not for Oprah. So
wow.
I'm grateful. It's really a fun place to do book club.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Lara, for coming and for sharing all the parts of you.
Yeah, thank you.
And you're getting lots of
I know. I'm just trying to look
yeah, before you disappear,
at
you
the
should read
before I
all the
go. Yeah.
comments.
Well, thank
Um,
you, everyone. You write like you talk. That's good. I like that.